Hi everybody and welcome to Different Leaf, a show for new and experienced cannabis consumers. I'm Britt Smith. Cooking and baking with marijuana is becoming way more popular among rookie home chefs / weed fans like me. But as many of us who are recklessly adventurous in the kitchen know all too well, infusing your own food is not for the faint of heart. Some of the most common mistakes include putting in way too much cannabis, under or overheating the flower, or throwing it in without activating the THC and ending up with something that tastes like hay. So this episode, we're going to learn how to infuse food at home with weed and actually make it taste and feel good. Our guest today is cannabis culinary author Robyn Griggs-Lawrence. Robyn's latest article in the Fall Edibles issue of Different Leaf, the magazine, is all about how to become a rock star weed chef from the comfort of your own home. If you have your fall issue of Different Leaf, the magazine handy, flip to page 35 and you can dig into Robyn's article where she picks the brains of 4 leading weed chefs. And in the following pages, you can find a delicious at-home infused recipe by each chef to try yourself, like pot-infused cornbread waffles, hazy Thai chicken wings, and CBD-infused honey apple cider vinaigrette. Ugh, yes please. Today, Robyn's going to break down essential do's and don'ts for first-time weed cooks, including how to find the right temperature to activate your THC, how to calculate your doses, how to mask or enhance the flavors of certain strains, and whether or not to wash your weed before cooking it. Yes, you heard that right. If you don't have your fall magazine issue yet, head on over to differentleaf.com where you can order it to be mailed directly to you, or you can find your local in-person retailer selling Different Leaf the magazine. That's differentleaf.com. And we'll be right back for our cannabis culinary breakdown with author Robyn Griggs-Lawrence. What's your background? What's your experience? How did you get into cannabis cooking?
The Cannabis Kitchen Cookbook in 2015 is when it came out. I actually started writing it in about 2010, 2011. So it was a long time in the making when it was really hard still to find cannabis chefs. So I worked with 12 cannabis chefs, 1 bartender and 12 chefs. And they really taught me everything I know about cannabis cooking, which is what I needed to translate to teach other people how to do it. And they also were incredibly generous in sharing their recipes with me. So all of the recipes in that cookbook are from them, which was a pretty huge task to gather all those. Yeah, so they basically really shared all their knowledge with me, and I was the scribe there, and I put it all together into the Cannabis Kitchen Cookbook. Basically, then they taught me. So I was able to start developing my own recipes. In 2018, I started a little catering company in Denver that did cannabis dinners for people. So we did that until early 2021, when having any sort of food service company became pretty much impossible. But that was really fun because I really got a chance to see all of this in action and experience watching people at cannabis dinners, which is just such a lovely thing. It's really like a symphony. You're pulling all the pieces together, and the people you're watching them tentatively step into it and then really start to loosen up and have fun. And by the end, they're all just laughing and the best friends ever. And that was a really fun way to spend the pandemic. And since then, I write every once in a while about it, do a little bit of sometimes recipe development, and still have a lot of friends in the community.
That's awesome. Did you go to a culinary school before all of this? Do you have roots in nothing like that?
No, that's why I needed the chefs. I had run a magazine before that called Natural Home. So I had worked with chefs and doing the culinary part of that magazine. So really working a lot with chefs who worked with organics and seasonal and all that kind of stuff, a lot of vegan. I think that was the coolest thing about doing this cookbook was I called all of them, just cold called them out of the blue and said, hey, I want to write this cookbook. I think it's necessary because I started to fool around with it myself and realized I don't know what I'm doing, and this is kind of scary.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
at that time in 2010, 2011, it was still, there was no information online, really. You could, if you dug and dug, you could find it, but it was a lot of dudes in forums arguing with each other. It just wasn't. So I call every one of them I called was like, absolutely. I want to share this I want this to get out. I've seen it help people so much. And so they were all like, just completely opened up their hearts and their minds and their talent and showed
Yeah.
me how to do it, which is incredible.
Do you remember some of those first recipes?
Yes. So I remember making pancakes was one of the first ones that I made, and I made it with using an infused almond milk. That was really, first of all, just learning how to make the infusions themselves was huge. This was way before we had powders and things that you could just put into the food. You had to understand really the basics behind it, which was that, first of all, you need to decarboxylate it, which means that you need to turn the THCA in the original and that's in the flour into THC, and that requires heat. And so you naturally do that when you're smoking, right? Because you light it. But when
Mhm.
you're cooking with it, I think that's one of the first mistakes that a lot of people make is that they don't realize that it has to be decarboxylated and they'll just throw it into something and be like, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
So that was, so I had to learn that. And then also THC, because cannabinoids are fat soluble as opposed to being water soluble, as some other things are, you have to have fat. So you have
Mm.
to infuse it into butter or oil or milk or some sort of, I usually use alternative milks because I'm dairy free, but you could do it into milk. People do it into honey. That's a little bit more difficult, but it does work. But you have to have something that's a fat to pull out the goodies.
This is leading perfectly into my first question, which is what are some of the typical mistakes that new cannabis cooks make? I
Mhm.
remember as a teenager, my friends and I realizing, hey, nobody's home at one of our houses. Let's get all of our weed and put it into a cake mix and see what happens.
Uh-huh.
And it was unbeknownst to us, I guess we decarboxylated the cannabis by adding it to the cake mix and putting the cake
Mhm.
mix in the
Yeah.
oven. And then that sort of decarboxylated the cannabis buds in there, but we were eating flour pieces at the end of it, like, we were eating pieces of cake that had flour in it and bud in it. So it's
Uh-huh.
not the best way to do it. So I
Right.
wanna go from being that sort of, "I don't know what I'm doing, let me just throw some flour in this," to, like, somebody who really understands how to infuse things. So what are some of those typical mistakes that new cannabis cooks typically make?
I think that is one of them. One of the biggest ones is just throwing it in. A lot of times it doesn't work. It doesn't, you don't get enough heat or it doesn't have
Mm.
the fat. You must have used oil or butter with that
Mhm.
cake mix. And so that's why it worked together. But a lot of times people don't put it in with the fat. Just throw it in with cereal or something and say, oh, that
Yeah.
didn't work. So I think that's one of the first things is just really, once you've learned how to make the infusion, how to infuse an oil or a butter or milk, you can almost make anything. So that's a really important first step. So if you can master the infusion, you can become a cannabis chef. You can start doing this. Second one though is people put in way too much. And
Yeah,
that's,
I
you
did
know,
I did that too, yeah.
and you do that once and you'll never do that again, right?
Yeah, you won't
It's
remember.
no. And I think that's the thing. People, so many people that I've worked with and over the years and cooked for, and they're like, but I'm a stoner. I smoke every day. And I'm like, I have to, you have to explain that it's very different eating it than smoking. It
Mm,
takes longer. It does it's a different process through your body. It goes through your liver. It's processed differently. It comes on a lot later. It comes on stronger and it lasts a lot longer. So it's
mhm,
a lot easier to dose yourself with food than it is with smoking flower. Vaping is a whole different story, but we won't get into that. So it's really important to understand that even if you are an all day smoker, you need to start food like you're a newbie. You need to really, in Colorado, we've been saying since, gosh, since I got into the industry, start low and go slow. Pretty
yep,
much everybody hears now, but it is so key. And for my dinners, when I would do them for people, I would do generally 10 milligrams throughout the entire meal.
mm,
And that's what we in Colorado, at least, call a serving. So when you buy candies or cookies or gummies or whatever, often they're 10 milligrams per serving. Although we're starting to see, because 10 milligrams can be too much for some people.
I was going to say, over here, we've got 5 milligrams, and we've even got some that are 2.5 milligrams. Yeah.
Yep. That's what we're starting to see it go down to. Back in the day, you could buy 200 milligrams. Candy.
Yeah, I think people have learned how to
Yes.
microdose themselves, and there is really no need to have an excessive amount of edible unless you've got a very high tolerance. I do. I have an incredibly high tolerance, and there's some people like me that it just 10, 15, 20
would do nothing. I'm the same.
Nothing. Yeah. But for those who are starting out, it's really key to get that dosing right. So how do you pick what strain to use, and then how do you know how much of it to put into your whatever you're cooking, your butter or your oil or milk?
So that's the beautiful thing about us having legal cannabis now is generally when you buy it, it will tell you what the THC percentage is of the flower that you're buying. It's usually right on there. So then you can basically you can go online. One of the people that I talked to for the article in Different Leaf is Jeff the 420 chef, and he has online a calculator. You can find him elsewhere too, but his is my favorite. And I think it's Jeff the 420 chef slash calculator. And you put in the amount of flour you're using, you put in the amount of oil you're using, and it will calculate for you how much THC per serving of that oil.
What? That's
I know.
cool.
It's awesome.
Oh.
It's so helpful. And then you can even take it further and put then that oil into your recipe, and it will calculate how much per serving of the recipe. So it'll even take it a step further. It's awesome.
That's genius.
Yeah. So back in the day when I put out my cookbook, we had to do this by hand, basically. And I had the whole calculation spelled out in my cookbook, but it's not as necessary anymore now that you could just get online to do it. My son actually made me an Excel sheet when I was doing it because I was like, you said there'd be no math. Wait, what?
There's a lot of math that goes into this. That's very helpful to know. You can go online and you can get some help as to like how much you should be trying, especially if you want to take very small amounts. So what about when you're decarboxylating your cannabis, which essentially means that you're heating it up under a very low heat for an extended amount of time, and that turns what would be the raw bud, which is full of the cannabinoid THCA, it turns it into THC, the stuff that will get us high, have that effect. How do we make sure that we don't burn our cannabis in that process?
That was another one of the horrible mistakes, right? That's an expensive mistake. So basically, you never want to I never went above 235. So you basically lay your cannabis out I use a sheet pan. I would use parchment paper is a wonderful thing. It will also help it's just like another layer of prevention to keep it from burning. So I put parchment paper on the cookie sheet and then lay it in a single layer and then put aluminum foil over the top of it. And then you put it in at between 2 and 235. That's the thing. Every oven is a little bit different. I like to err on the side of not going too high, so never over 235. And then for about 35 to 40 minutes, but start checking at about 25, 30 minutes just to make sure.
What are you checking for?
So you're checking you'll smell it. It'll start to turn a little bit golden. So it will no longer be green. It'll start to be just a little bit more golden. And you can tell that it's becoming, and if it's starting to burn, take it out. But you just want to keep an eye on it. And
you want to get it crispy and
exactly.
not too burnt.
And you will smell it. Your whole kitchen will smell. Your whole place will smell. If you're worried about being discreet,
that's out the window.
It is. So
that's not going to happen.
It's not. It's not. Yeah, that's it.
It sounds like it's not too difficult if you just follow the science, which I guess is with most cooking, but there are some of us that aren't so naturally talented with that.
I always like to say it's like a combination of art and science, right? And you do need to follow the science to get your numbers and to get your carboxylation done, but then you get to start playing.
So what about the techniques that we should know about while we're actually cooking? Depends on, I guess, what we're making. But is there anything in particular that really ruins an infused dish or an infused baked good?
Just the only thing would be an improperly made infusion. Keep going back to that. As long as you can get your butter, oil, milk, whatever down, then it's just like regular cooking. I'm sorry. No, there is. You don't want it to go above 350 generally.
Fahrenheit?
350 Fahrenheit. Yes. Sorry. I can't calculate the Celsius. You can probably.
It's okay. No, I don't know it.
Okay. So yeah, you don't, because at 350, it's going to start to degrade your THC, and it's
Yeah.
just going to start to take a little bit of the potency away. And also the terpenes and everything else in we talk so much about THC, and there's so much else that you're pulling from this. You're also pulling the terpenes, which are giving it the flavor, and do all sorts of other wonderful things, and the CBD, if there is any in your flowers. So you just want to always look for recipes, or try to convert a recipe to so that you're not cooking above 350. Again, frying, you can do it and it will work, and it will still get you high, but you're going to lose a lot. And Chef Unika talks about this in the article. You're going to lose a lot of all of the rounded out that I just talked about, the terpenes and everything else. Again, it's like what we were talking about with your THC milligrams, is low and slow.
Yeah.
Always, if you're keeping things at a simmer and taking your time with it, you're probably going to have better results than if you're just like throwing it on a super hot. One of my favorite recipes is actually for sweet potato fries. And
Ooh.
oh, they're so good. And it works. They work great. So you can fry it, but it's just depending on what you want and what you're looking for. If you want to pull out the flavor of the flower more and the cannabis itself, then you want to keep the temperatures more on the low side.
Right, right. So you did also discuss that decarboxylating and infusing into the butter, oil, and milk is not the only way that you can infuse your food. Nowadays, thank you, science, we have a dissolvable powder that you can add to food, and we've got tinctures that you can add to food as well. What should we know about the dissolvable powders and the tinctures? Does everything mix with food?
Those were breakthrough. The powders generally need some sort of a liquid to dissolve into, but man, that was life changing when those came out. It was,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate those because they are already dosed for you. You don't have to worry about any of that. When I was doing my catering, I generally would start the meal with a mocktail with one of the powders. Usually a 1-to-1 CBD THC, for a couple of reasons. One, first, it's just an easy way because I was getting my infusions going. And so it was an easy way to start getting them easing into it. But also, so they can start to feel the effects of the THC because it comes on immediately. That's another big difference, is it's more immediate. So they're starting to realize, oh, I'm getting high here. Like, I might not want to just dive in to start gobbling up a bunch of the other stuff because they start to have that in their system. And I like getting a little CBD in their system too, because that balances with the THC. A lot of the flower we're working with these days, the CBD's been pretty much bred out, right? So it's nice to be getting a little THC or CBD into their system as well.
Nice. That's a really nice idea. In France, I learned that's called an aperitif, where
Yes.
it's like a little drink just to get you hungry. But it's
Mhm.
also, you get your buzz on a little bit and it just makes you a little peckish.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's the thing, because a lot of times it does take a while for when you're cooking with the fats. So sometimes it's not coming on till dessert.
You got to think about your whole meal if you're doing a meal for somebody else, right?
Yes.
But if you're just baking something at home for yourself and you're just a new cook, but you do want to make something that tastes really nice, we did touch on it earlier, how to mask and enhance the weed taste. So you mentioned that to make it taste strong, you won't heat it up too high.
The higher you go, the more you're just going to start to make it all go away. I'm of the mind that you want your food to taste a little bit like cannabis if you're cooking with it, just to let people know.
Yeah.
Too many stories I've heard of people who grandma ate all the cookies before she realized that. But if you don't want it to taste, I generally try to mask it with stronger flavors. That's chocolate is a really good one. The warming spices like cinnamon or cardamom, things like that can also mask it. So just stronger flavors will mask the flavor more. But again, yeah, I think if you can build an appreciation for, if you're using good cannabis, it should add a lovely taste as opposed to get, you know.
Yeah, I think that when you're cooking with it, it's really important to smell the bud first if you're using bud.
Yes,
Because I think that much like cooking with any other sort of spice or herb, it should complement what you're cooking. So, like
exactly.
something that smells lemony can go with a fish or chicken.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Now you're getting into the art.
Yeah, yeah. Like you're thinking about it as an actual herb, like a piece of a toolkit for your cooking. And it just so happens that the side effect is that you get a little lightheaded and giggly and happy and euphoric. That's not a bad
Which is a
thing.
lovely side effect. Yes.
Yeah. And so now you can start thinking about how to mix those flavors together and make them complement each other. And you could do like a spicy, like there are some cannabis strains that I think, at least when you smoke them, taste spicy.
Yes.
I wonder if that would translate into spicy sort of taste when you're eating it in an infused food. Is that what would happen?
Yeah, and again, as long as you're not really overcooking it, and so that
Yeah.
you're wiping those out, but you can really, and that's where we're looking at the terpene profile of the
Yeah.
flower that you're using. So limonene will give you that citrusy flavor, and then you can start to think, oh, what would this work with? This would be great with lemon pancakes or
Mm.
putting on a fish or whatever. So definitely, that's where you start. I feel like getting to level 2 is
Yeah.
right. You're really starting to play with it as an actual ingredient, not just, hey, we're looking to get a little buzzed off of this. That's when it starts to really become cuisine.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
really cool. One other thing that I read about in your article in the magazine is that a lot of folks will clean their bud before they cook with it. I didn't know about this. How do you do it and why do you do it?
This was life changing for me too. This Jeff the 420 chef told me this many years ago, and because I wasn't doing that, and you just nobody. I feel like nobody really does. You don't think
No.
about it. And he said you clean your vegetables and your fruits, and I was like, yeah, I do. And then
Oh,
you realize,
yeah.
yeah. And when you clean it, you realize, oh God, like I really should be doing this. There are two ways that he taught me to do. There's the super simple way, which is basically you just blanch it. So put it into simmering water for about 5 minutes, then put it into an ice bath.
Put my cannabis.
It's not water soluble. It's not going to pull any of the goodies out of it. In order
Okay.
to pull the goodies out of it, you've got to use the fat. I know that's what everybody says. I'm like,
It
no,
feels really
it
wrong.
does. And again, even if you got it wet, as long as you dried it really well, you could still cook
Yeah.
it and it would still work.
That's good to know because I've spilled drinks on weed
Right,
before, and I
exactly. I put it through the washing machine.
but you can save
Yeah,
it?
you can. So basically, so when you're cleaning it, basically, then you've got to let it dry really well, and that's another reason to decarboxylate it in the oven. So
Gotcha,
you're
yeah.
gonna really make sure that it gets super, super dry. I know it freaks people out.
That's crazy. The idea of boiling your weed before you cook with it makes sense when you say, like, you do wash your vegetables and so can you do this in, like, a salad spinner, or is it coffee press, or
Yes, after you take it out. So there's another way. So when you take it out after you've put it into your ice bath, you could definitely spin it before you decarb it. So the long way, which Jeff really recommends, and this is where you realize you need to do it, is to basically just put it into a French press, okay,
Yeah.
and cover it with distilled water, press it down, let it sit for maybe 12 hours, and then you're gonna be amazed at how your
Hmm.
water looks. It's so gross. There's like dirt on it. People have been handling it. Think about all the people who handled that as it went
True.
through the process. There's
Yeah.
dirt, there's bugs, there's bug parts, and there's all sorts of things. So when you, I know,
Should
right?
I be washing my cannabis before I smoke it?
I never thought about that. I never went that far. Maybe. I know. It
Wow.
isn't. So you just you keep doing that. So you keep refreshing the water until your water runs clear. And it can take 3 to 4 iterations before you finally have clear water, which is pretty amazing. I know. So
I've never heard of washing your cannabis before you
I
cook with it.
hadn't either. I hadn't either. And it was really, again, it was one of those, it was like, oh, yeah, okay.
Makes
I've eaten a
sense,
lot
yeah.
of bad stuff.
Yeah. But hey, I'm alive. I
Exactly. I
survived.
know. Exactly. Sometimes it's, what doesn't kill you. So
So on that note, you've obviously cooked a lot with cannabis and you've gone through a lot of different kinds of recipes. What are some of your favorites, some of your favorite savory, some of your favorite sweet that your go-to when you want to cook with cannabis?
one of the things that what I really started to do, especially when I started catering, was sauces. I
Mm,
really like to infuse sauces and sides as opposed to doing the whole entree or because then people can take care of themselves. Like you can
yeah.
decide to put a little or a lot. I make a chimichurri sauce with an infused oil that is just awesome. And you can put it on so many different chicken, meat, fish. It works with so many different things, even sometimes on vegetables. So that, and also an infused Bordelaise sauce that can go on meat is also a really good one. And in the morning, infused smoothies. I think that's a great way to start the day. Again, I just use a little bit of infused almond milk. One of the chefs that I worked with for the cookbook would just throw a decarbed bud right directly into the smoothie and just smooth it out, and it would work. There are many different ways to go about that. Those are my favorites. I think for dessert, same thing. I like to make a chocolate sauce that can go on top of something.
Yeah, then you can put as much on as you want.
Exactly. And especially when, you're serving, they can have a little, you can have a lot. It works for everybody. And I always like to, too, offer a non-infused version as well, just so if someone just really likes the taste of that sauce, they don't have to completely dose themselves in order to,
I would sit there at the end of the meal, like licking it out and being like,
it's been known to happen. Yeah.
It's not the worst thing that could happen in the world, but it's definitely a surprise.
It's not. It's like, especially if you're at home already and you're like getting ready for bed. That's fine.
Yeah.
So that was the fun part. It's just at the end of the night, you just
hanging with your friends and a little bit baked, mellow.
It's so different than an alcohol party. And I think that's the funnest part is no one ever gets fights. No one ever gets obnoxious. The worst thing that ever happened is someone's, wow, I'm really tired. I might have to go to bed. But mostly it's just people that are talking more and laughing and it's just so fun to watch.
I'm going to take all of this really good sound advice and try and throw myself a little infused party where people can serve themselves and dose themselves. I like the idea of giving people the option for how much they want to take. I'm going to try and make some nice sauces and maybe some salad dressing.
Nice. Yes, it's another great one.
Yeah. So thank you so much for talking to us today, Robyn, and thank you for your article in Different Leaf. If you guys want to read more, you can check out the full edible issue of Different Leaf, which is out now, differentleaf.com. Thank you so much, Robyn, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was so fun.
A huge thanks to today's guest, author Robyn Griggs-Lawrence. Be sure to check out her latest article, Fire It Up, What You Need to Know to Become a Cannabis Rockstar Chef, in the latest issue of Different Leaf, the magazine. Available now at differentleaf.com and thousands of retailers across the US and Canada. Next week, we'll be talking about a new solar-powered cannabis edible, an infused chocolate bonbon from Massachusetts' own holistic nutritionist chef, Kylene Keenan, founder of By Kai Edibles.
Reishi and cordyceps and lion's mane, all of these have amazing benefits that are certainly coming to the market now and people are starting to understand. But these plants really help build our resilience to stress, which is why I tell everyone, we just all need to eat more adaptogens because, stress isn't getting any less, it seems like, in the world today.
So you found a way to put this into candy. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Subscribe wherever you're listening right now so you don't miss next week's episode, and follow us on social media at Different Leaf or at different_leaf. And I'm at Brit the British. Remember, go to differentleaf.com to order the new fall edibles issue mailed directly to you, or go to the subscribe and shop tab to find the nearest in-person retailer selling Different Leaf. That's differentleaf.com.